Okay. First question for Karen.
Okay.
What do you tell your children about the state of male and female relations today, particularly about the legal biases your sons could face in the event of a false accusation of molestation, rape, etc.?
I tell them 100% the absolute truth of what their risks are, going out and having relationships with women. If any woman that they have a relationship or a sexual encounter with is a little bit crazy, that can land you in a world of hot water. It can lose you your education. It can lose you your liberty. You can end up in prison, in jail, awaiting trial for a year or two. There's a man in Toronto named Elliott who is almost at finishing year 3 of not being able to use any device that connects to the internet because he disagreed with a politically active feminist over Twitter. And those are his bail conditions. The trial has been dragging on for almost 3 years now. There's a verdict due in January, I believe. He's facing 6 months in prison for, I think the worst thing that he said was that, I think he said she was fat. And there was, the police testified, there was nothing threatening, nothing remotely sexual, nothing, I read all the Twitter logs, there was really nothing there, other than that he persistently disagreed with their positions and their actions, her and her group and her friends. And yeah, she said that made her afraid for her safety. And she knows some Toronto City councillors, and she's in tight with Toronto Police Services, and she's friends with someone who works for the Ontario Attorney General. And so somehow this trial, this travesty of a trial, happened. So, and he's a man and she's a woman, and so it plays in the media, right? So I can't imagine anybody wanting to live in a universe where Rush Limbaugh could tweet at you, your tweets are upsetting me and making me scared. If you don't stop, right, then I'm going to charge you with a criminal offense. I really don't think anyone wants to live in that universe, right? And so this trial in particular is going to set a really nasty precedent if the verdict is anything other than not guilty. And so my sons, they need to be prepared for the world that's out there, and I don't sugarcoat it, and I let them know 100% that I will be behind them if they ever get into that kind of trouble. But you know, it's one of those things you gotta prepare your kids for. So. And my daughter too. She knows all about this, and I don't sugarcoat it for her too. So.
And the next question is for all the panelists. How did each of you become interested in the topics you spoke about today? And if you already maybe touched upon, just dive in a little deeper for it.
Well, marijuana policy, as I explained, I just tried pot and started questioning authority, and then everything I was reading about the drug war and policing and even oil wars and the deeply entrenched interest from the pharmaceutical company and other big industries in maintaining prohibition, that's how I got interested in it. And I remember when I started smoking pot, of course my parents and my teachers, everybody who saw the leadership student suddenly smoking pot, just like, oh no, what's gonna happen to her? And it was interesting and eye-opening because by questioning authority, I wasn't willing to accept a lot of the things that I was told by people in positions of authority. And like I said, when I moved to Vancouver and started learning about Ron Paul and what he spoke about, it really opened up my mind to the idea of the individual and the power that we have, and the responsibility we have as individuals. I don't know, this is kind of a strange side note, but when you're on an airplane and it says, if you're with small children and the airbags fall down, you need oxygen masks, put the mask on yourself first before the child. it's like you have to look after yourself and take care of yourself if you're even going to help others, and that kind of applies in real life too. If you're not able to look after yourself first, being fed, providing for your home, and taking care of yourself, there's no way that you can help others. So the idea of the individual being required to help the collective as a whole, I don't know if that's like a libertarian or liberty associated, but it was this concept that as an individual you have the power that's more powerful than the collective, because the collective is made up of the individuals. And I don't know if that makes sense or not, but the reason I got into marijuana policy again is because I realized that it went far deeper than just harassing people for smoking a joint. It went so deep into mandatory minimum sentencing and even having private prison industry lobbying to maintain mandatory minimums to make sure that prisons stay full. Those are unjust. That's not the right form of business model. I think that's a really bad business model. I think it's terrible that we continue to even talk about the idea of building prisons to create jobs. That's just so wrong that you need to make sure some of you guys go behind bars so some of you have jobs, making sure those bars stay closed. I mean, that's totally wrong. So marijuana was just a little side issue, but it opened my mind to all concepts of the individual and freedom and non-violence and not using force or coercion, and that made me realize that government is just force and coercion. As I said, makes you do things you don't want to and stops you from doing things you do. So I don't know, marijuana opened my eyes, so I guess being a stoner led to bigger, better things.
I'm gonna hand this to you.
I want to make sure okay. So the interesting topic, I think I'm going to answer a little bit different than that, if that's okay. I'm going to answer why I'm interested in the liberty movement in general. And what I do as a profession. Oh, okay. Well, that's actually a pretty easy to answer. I grew up as kind of I would say outsider in some ways, because I like this really extreme music. That was a real big part of my life, and I didn't share a lot of it, like death metal. I was like a death metal fan, and played in a lot of bands over the years, record deals. Long hair. In law school, I had blonde hair down the back and big goatee. I didn't really fit in. I hated law school. And before that, it was dyed black. When people in Toronto looked at me funny, like a guy my size has long black hair, right? But I was always kind of an outsider because I didn't really like the whole negative message associated with death metal, and so I just kind of developed a tough skin. I learned to be able to get along with people I disagreed with. And that started happening very early on in my life, and then I went to Waterloo, where I studied political philosophy, and studied under Jan Narveson, and dropping that name probably. Jan Narveson's probably Canada's preeminent libertarian political philosopher. And so I was there, and then after that I went to law school, or circuitous road between the two, and then law school was hardly me acting out. And realizing that most people I was in law school with just saw law as a tool to oppress others. They didn't put it in those terms, of course. They just, they were making you better off by taking your rights away from you. Because whether or not you realize that you should be living a certain way and controlled by the government. But I mean, that's, most people enter law school with these ideas that they can make the world better. They just don't realize that they're authoritarian and they want to, control other people. And I rebelled against that right from the get-go, and so I went to a Canadian Constitution Foundation conference when I was in law school, and at that moment I realized that this was my one opportunity to actually do constitutional law, which is basically half philosophy, half law. So you become jack of all trades, master of none. And I was very fortunate to get hired and have been there since.
Okay, me, I was in the middle of a not very fun divorce, and I've never been a feminist, just got to make that clear. I wasn't somebody who converted away from it. I always figured it was kind of bullshitty. At least, the sort of the public awareness campaigns about domestic violence is completely contrary to my lived experience and the things that I've observed. among my neighbors and stuff like that. Just like domestic violence is just a very, very angry, horrible, controlling man who beats this small, decorative victim for burning the toast or whatever. That was not my experience of witnessing couple violence. And so I always knew that there was like, it just wasn't right. But when I was divorcing, I just happened to, I was actually, at the time I was writing erotic fiction. And yes, I did that. And I was part of a romance and erotic fiction writers community, and they were, one day they posted on the forum, "Hey everybody, look at these losers. Let's all go over and swarm this website and really take these guys down a peg." And I'm like, oh, because they're a bunch of misogynists and whiny man babies. And complaining about nothing, right? So I went over there and granted the article in question was pretty stupid. It was something that market forces can easily correct, and if guys who like action movies would just stop stealing them and actually go and see them in the theater, then more people will pay that $300 million to make the movies that you love without making them appeal to your girlfriend too. Because they know she's gonna drag you into the theater, right? So, I actually went into the comments section and I told them that when one of them said, "Oh, the new Star Trek is actually not bad. I totally ripped it off the internet, watched it 10 times, it was great." And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would anybody make a movie for you? They can't make any money off of you. They can make money off of your girlfriend. So they're gonna make a movie that she likes. And these guys, who apparently were like vile, horrible misogynists, they took my point. They said, "You know what, you're right." And I went and I read a whole bunch of other articles on the website, and usually on these men's rights websites, they post lots of links to lots of research, peer-reviewed studies, all of that. And I went and I read what they were saying in all of these other articles about more important things than whether science fiction is becoming romanticized. And I started thinking, you know, I always knew feminism was kind of bullshitty, but now I'm seeing how deep into law and policy they've worked their way. Highly politically active, highly dogmatic, activist feminist groups. I'm seeing how it's affecting men and boys and girls and other women, grandmothers who don't get to see their grandchildren because their sons have been alienated from their families and things like that, and the court will not enforce access because there's no money in it for the court. There's money in enforcing child support for the government. Every dollar of child support that gets collected and extracted from someone, that's another dollar of welfare that the government doesn't have to pay out of its own pocket. But it's all red ink when it comes to enforcing access. There's no benefit for the government in that. There's only benefit for families, for the men, mostly men, some women, and the children that suffer, right, from being denied access to each other. So these just really, and maybe it was because I was going through a divorce and I was highly aware of how my decision to divorce, and it was a unilateral decision, was really going to affect my children and my husband, whom I still really cared about. And I had to do something, and I had to start talking about it. And when I started talking about it, I just happened to, I guess, have a way of doing it that people listen to, and it kind of snowballed. And now I feel like I have a duty to do that. I said duty.
All right, this one's for Derek. Are there any watchdog resources that can be used to identify active or ongoing cases that involve the charter?
Newspapers. That's probably the best one, honestly. If you're, oh boy. I was going to say if you're more liberty-minded, you should watch the National Post, but oh boy. watch them all, because there's, the Globe and Mail has good stuff in it. The Star occasionally does. National Post once in a while. Ezra Levant actually does some good work. You might not agree with his analysis. I don't agree with his analysis all the time. But he generally picks the problem cases out. Yeah, those are the main ones. Of course, I would say our website, theccf.com or .ca. But generally, you find us in newspapers all over the country. So that's what I would say. And if you're interested in one particular issue, then you find a group that collects information on that issue. Like I imagine cannabis culture, there's probably lots of groups that collect information and let people know and disseminate knowledge. It's the same, the gun rights groups are that way too, and so that's, you can find your niche and delve in. But in terms of like a resource that you can just go and get everything, I'm not sure such a thing exists. Maybe there is, I don't know. I live in the real world, not the virtual world, so I don't know.
Oh, burn.
Okay, well, I'm assuming that this is directed to Derek just because he's a lawyer, but I actually would want to know all of your views about this. What are the libertarian views on child rights versus parental rights? Maybe just your views on it, personally.
That was my group who came up with that.
Okay, child rights, was it versus parental rights?
Yeah.
So I'm guessing this is in a family law context where the rights are opposed?
Anyone want to?
Okay, children are human beings, they have the same rights as adults do. Children don't know everything that adults do, so they do actually need a paternal hand at times. And they need to be guided to keep themselves from harming themselves in their own best interests. Yeah, but I hesitate to say the government should step in and be their parent. But in terms of, okay, just here's my philosophy of it. My wife kind of dislikes this, I might be an extremist. But I have this idea that when I'm interacting with my kids, I'm actually, in my mind, I think I'm interacting with them as adults. And so I want to treat them with the same respect I would treat a peer with. And so when my kids are, being kids and silly and whatever, I need to think, well, this is my son Sam as a 6-year-old now. How would I treat him if he was behaving this way and he was 20? What type of respect would I show? Now, of course, if a 20-year-old acts like a 6-year-old, you might treat them a little oddly, but what I mean is that this is a fully independent functioning agent who has all the same rights that everyone else does. So I tend not to like pictures of them in the bathtub, and I would never do that to a 20-year-old boy who's mine. So I hesitate for that, and that's kind of extreme, I admit, but that's the way I feel, is that that children are, treat them with the same respect that you treat any other individual. So I don't know if that in any way answers the question.
With me, I think there is a certain balancing act that you have to do. I mean, the use of force, right? Your kid is throwing a massive tantrum in a restaurant. The moment you pick him up against his will and carry him out the door, you're engaging in force and coercion, right? I mean, you can't get away from it as a parent. You absolutely can't. There are some issues that are particular to the men's issues movement, the men's rights movement, that really, really matter to us, and one of them is genital cutting. That is absolutely non-consensual. There is no way a baby 8 days old can consent to having a portion of his anatomy cut away, amputated, without anesthetic, because of cosmetic reasons or because of religious reasons. We have freedom of religion, we also have freedom from religion, and making a religious decision that is permanent and irreversible, that affects your child in that way, on their behalf, without their consent, this is something that is just, in my opinion, it is wrong, wrong, wrong. That is not a matter of parental rights. That is a matter of a child's right to bodily autonomy and to genital integrity. So there are we don't laugh about it when it happens to girls, when it's part of the Sunni tradition, when it's, you know, in the Hadiths. We don't think of it as a matter of religious rights, or as a matter of a parent's right to decide for their child. And so I think that we really, the whole parents versus children's rights, we need to really give it some thought, at least in the context of certain issues, even hitting. Mothers hit their boys 2 to 3 times as often as they hit their girls. And when they've actually put recorders on the moms to wear all the time and observe them throughout their day, they found that, you know, 3 times a day, that kid is getting smacked, and the average time between when the conflict starts and when the child is hit is between 10 and 30 seconds. So this is not a parent who's tried to reason with the child. It's not a parent who's tried to treat the child like an autonomous person. This is a parent who is frustrated, and mothers are overwhelmingly the ones who do this because in part because mothers spend more time with their children than fathers do, but also in part because mothers tend to put way more boundaries on the child, and then they don't enforce them religiously. Fathers tend to put fewer boundaries on the child and enforce them, like, bam, you know, foot's coming down. So the child doesn't tend to get out of control. The child doesn't feel like that they can push the envelope with dad and test the boundaries with dad the way they often feel like they do with mom, and then mom gets frustrated and hits the kid. So these are all things as far as where does the child's right to not be hit and the parent's right to discipline your child begin. That's a really tough question. So, you know, like it's complicated. My thoughts on that are complicated.
Actually, education's a good one, because like, it's always puzzled me, like, what right do I have, or like, it sounds really bad. Can I raise my kids to be like me, or should I let them be, you know, precious little snowflake that develops independently of any influence? And you know, I think, yeah, no, we don't want to, but I think I'm all in favor of parents being able to choose the education they want for their child, and this is predominantly, you know, I think the important issue for education is what's parental choice involved. And I think the alternative that always gets lost is like, okay, so there's parental choice, but what's the alternative? Well, it's government choice. So do you want your child to be educated to become like you, the way you want, and have your vested interest, you know, guiding the, you know, that child's education? Or do you want to give that up to the state, and so they can become a good citizen? And you know, in this, it's hard for me to understand like where those boundaries are also, like, because I don't want to just impose myself on my children, making them like me, but also I'm the one best suited, well, my wife, we're the ones best situated to decide what's best for our children, because evolutionarily speaking, we're the ones with the best interest in their success. The government has absolutely no interest in their success, other than be good little citizens and not rock the boat. So I think that's important too, that parents should have as much right in the much input into the education of their children as possible. And I think that also may kind of sort of go to that question.
So we all know what Nick thinks about this topic, but everyone wants to know what your personal views are on proportional representation or first past post, or just any type of voting system in general.
When I campaigned with the BC Green Party, that was in 2009, I think we had the BC single transferable vote up at that time. Pretty sure that was the same election. And I mean, it was hard to try and explain it to people, and even now I'm thinking, how did that work? I mean, I forget exactly how, but it's really hard for people to give up what they know for something unknown, even if they don't like the known that they're dealing with. It's like, well, you know, it's the devil you know. It's, you know, it's not a perfect system, but at least we understand how it works now, and we don't really understand that other concept, so people aren't willing to go ahead and try something new. But it's also difficult to get that sort of reform because even in BC, you had to reach a certain threshold to get that passed, and it's almost impossible to get to that point. So it's more of an education and awareness campaign, just to tell people, hey, how their vote matters, how decisions are made, how government works. I mean, quite frankly, I think most of us sitting here know a lot more about policy and government and that sort of stuff than the majority of the public out there. I mean,
Politicians.
and even politicians too. A lot of people don't understand a whole lot, and even if they care or they're passionate. I mean, one example is when Trudeau and the Liberals won federally. You had some people say, "Oh, well, I really hate Christy Clark and the BC Liberals," and it's like, well, the BC Liberals aren't the same as the federal Liberals. And so people are very confused about how everything works, even when they're voting in the federal election. They're like, I'm voting for Trudeau, and it's like, no, you're not. You're going to go vote for the Liberal who represents the same party. So single transferable vote was probably a good option, but how to educate people about it and get them on board, and then to implement that change. I mean, some people might say it's very costly to change the whole way we do things, to do a whole new system. I don't know, it probably is, but it's probably a good investment. But it seems to me that the system we have right now isn't really fair representation. But what is fair representation? Again, if you're doing it by postal code, you don't all agree on the same thing. Me and my neighbor have very different priorities. So what kind of representation should we have? That's, I think, an age-old question. But single transferable vote was an interesting concept, and I think if British Columbia was able to look at another option for provincial politics, they'd probably look at that again. But having people get educated about all the options out there, that's a tough challenge, and most people tune it out because they just want to make sure they get paid to pay their bills, and they're just trying to survive, and it might seem trivial to try and meddle with the way we vote. But people got involved this federal election, so I hope they give more of a damn about how it works and how government controls our lives.
I don't know whether I deserve to have an opinion about this because this last federal election is probably the first time I've voted in 14 years. And prior to that, it was a municipal election that had some very, very important issues in our small community. In fact, I would say if you're gonna vote in your municipal election, vote in your provincial election. Those are the important ones. Those are where your candidate is actually going to go to bat for you if you're ever in trouble. I think the idea of a popular vote is, is the least worst system, I guess. Proportional representation is, Nick made a really good case for it. He really did. Because I know when, leading up to the election, right, I'm in this little region in, north central Edmonton. And expanding further north and to the east and the west, there are a lot of orange signs out. That's my region. And that's probably the only reason I actually got off my ass and voted in this election, was because of all of those orange signs that scared the ever-loving crap out of me. Obviously, people in my region didn't agree with my politics, and in fact, I don't know whether a whole lot of people do. So proportional representation, I think, would be the fairest way to go. I think it would.
Well, this is kind of a shotgun blast from the hip, so I'd like to start my comment with saying, don't vote, it just encourages the bastards. Now, having said that, I think there is still good reason to get involved in politics, because you know what? We, us Liberty folks, were asleep at the switch for the last 30 years, and we ended up in a terrible mess. So we need to do something about it, but is voting the solution? I don't know. It's, if you look at the numbers, crunch numbers, it's pretty much irrational to vote, except if you're talking about municipal level. My municipal council, some of the councillors were winning by like 5 and 10 votes. Yeah, my vote literally does matter then. It could be a vote that swings the balance. Would it have done that in the federal election? No. Might as well just start playing the lottery, right? And there's no chance. but that doesn't mean don't get involved. So in the end, should we change the voting system? Doesn't matter. You know what really matters is civil society. Unless we have full functioning civil society where people actually care about the issues and have strong ethics about it's wrong to take other people's stuff and redistribute it against their will. It's wrong to do this. Until we have that, we're not going to start electing politicians that will make these changes. And it doesn't matter how we elect them. It really doesn't matter. It's a little bit akin to this whole Senate debate. Should we have a Senate? Should it be a triple U Senate? Should we have no Senate? You know what? We've had the Senate as it is right now for a long time. They're supposed to be, the sober second thought. We still have lots of terrible laws. What good have they been? So have it, don't have it, doesn't make any difference. I'm not sure that changing the voting system would make any difference either.
Can I add one more quick thing that I used to say to people during the campaign and in our movement? They say, oh, I don't vote, it doesn't matter. And I thought, well, our system in Canada isn't that great, but as somebody said, it's more for getting rid of a government rather than voting in a government. It's mostly just like, oh, this is crummy, I don't like it, let's go with the other guy instead. That's kind of how it's done. But as I tell people, the only way to get rid of a bad government is through violent revolution or voting them out. I don't know, and violent revolution is kind of like a last resort, I think, but when it comes down to it, like if you really don't like your government, other than bitching about it on Facebook, you can either take up arms or take up your pencil in that ballot box, and even though it's a small little piece of power that's exercised, if the government told you didn't have the right to vote anymore, would you be upset? If the answer is yes, then get out there and vote. Because it's a shitty system, but it is the system that governs our life. And I always used to say, it's kind of like we're on a bus, and the bus is going that way, and that's a dark, stormy, I don't like where we're going. I'm looking out the window, I don't like where we're going. Some people just say, I'm off the bus. Screw you guys, I hate the system, screw government. And they just want to sit back and criticize. And I'm like, well, that's fine and dandy, but then you get off the bus and you watch all your fellow friends go down towards that nightmare. That's not really cool. You should probably stay on that bus and slowly try and crawl your way to the front and get up and start yelling at the driver, no, go this way, turn a different way, or try and get in that driver's seat and steer it yourself. But if you get off that bus, if you stop participating in that shitty ride down to wherever the hell you're going, sorry to swear, but honestly, like, politics is really discouraging, it's really disappointing, it's really difficult, and a lot of people don't want to get involved, but if you're not going to get involved, you're helping it get worse, because for every person who gives a damn about liberty and being free, there's somebody out there who wants to control you and oppress you, and they're going to show up, and they're going to get active, and if you don't, they're going to outnumber you. So, again, crummy system, but it governs our lives, and you can say as much as you want, oh, I don't believe in the government, like the free man on the land movement. I mean, there's some valid points made there, but when they put the handcuffs on you and put you in jail, whether you believe in their right to do it or not, you're there, so, get involved.
Well, I'm just going to give my opinion because I can. I've never voted in my life. In all the things I've read, just basically no matter what system you choose, someone loses, and I don't like it. So I don't know what the answer is. And also, I ran in the election as a Libertarian. I just ran a Libertarian because I was lazy, to be honest. If I were to go all out, I would have ran as an independent. But that's how it is. Anyway, I got 499 votes, even though I did not say at any time vote Libertarian or vote for me. I never said that. It's so funny because on the next day on Facebook I posted, I didn't vote, but I ran the election. Do I still have the right to complain? Because all of my non-Libertarian friends, they're all about, hey, you should vote, it matters, like make a difference, whatever, but you're not advocating for views, you're not starting discussions. So I don't know, there's a gray area that I love pushing people's buttons on.
Yeah, but just vote and then think that's all.
Yeah, it doesn't end there. Like it's a lifelong cycle. Another reason why you shouldn't put me up on a panel like this. The next question I'm picking is, how do you think anarcho-capitalism reflects on libertarianism?
I know a lot of people who call themselves, anarchist, socialist, or no. God, there's so many different terms. See, okay, this is exactly the problem. There's all these terms. It's like, you know what do they even mean, really? People have different ideas of what exactly it means. So I'm just going to say capitalism, to me, and anarchist capitalist basically just means being free to use your dollar, to spend it, to make a difference with the power of your dollar. That's a real free market, is deciding how things are going to be by where you're going to spend your money. But I'm going to admit a bit of ignorance and pass the mic, because that's not my expertise.
Okay, I don't know a whole lot about the, I'm not all book learned about this. But I do watch the antics of certain people, anarcho-capitalists, anarcho-communists online. I watch videos of them protesting, and I watch videos of them giving their opinions, and they're usually, at least the ones that I get to see, they're pretty extreme, right? And they're often really more enthusiastic than maybe healthy. I will definitely say that if I had to pick between anarcho-capitalist and anarcho-communist, I would be going for the less crazy one, the anarcho-capitalist. I don't even understand how the words anarcho and communist go together. It's kind of like squishing those those wooden trains with the magnets, and you're trying to, and you switch it around, and then there's like a gap, and they're all chugging it. Yeah, no, they don't go together, and so that's just crazy thing number one to write off that whole thing. But yeah, I'm gonna plead ignorance, other than these guys get up to a lot of seriously interesting stuff. And then it goes viral, and I get to watch it and be entertained.
A-okay.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay. There is a current trend in, universities to stifle free speech on topics that may be triggering. I think that this is because of an effort to help protect people with mental illnesses and PTSD. Would this be better handled by providing better campus mental health services as opposed to censoring content? And what are some other possible solutions? I guess this is open to all of you.
I mean, I just read a story right now about in Yale, there were two professors there's a protest to have them step down. Yeah. Universities and places of education are where you have to be challenged, where there have to be things that make you uncomfortable, as said earlier. And I think it's very scary watching the development of this fear of free speech, and that you might offend somebody. I mean, being offended is really, really important. And you're talking about how, I forget who said that, but in other countries where the extremist political parties manage to actually have a say and gather up support, it's like, well, that may be terrible that a lot of people want to support a sort of fascist, neo-Nazi type party, but once you let enough people do that and demonstrate what they believe, and it will create some sort of response in the opposite. If you can't actually discuss and see the ideas people have that are unpopular, then how are you going to have a truly informed decision about anything? If you don't hear people out for their controversial opinions that make you unhappy, how are you ever going to form your own opinions? I mean, it's almost like being a devil's advocate, right? You have to have people out there arguing in favor of very unpopular positions because they need to get the conversation going. Like, and marijuana policy is one of those sort of examples where it really was unpopular for a long time to be in favor of legalizing marijuana. People accused you of promoting drug use, promoting drug abuse, promoting brain-dead behavior and all these negative things. But only through those debates and discussion could you actually educate people. It made, if you're on a radio show, as my husband and I often were, and people call up in favor, and the host and all the people listening, they're all, yeah, we agree with you. You're so right. Yeah, that's so true. I'm going to repeat what you said in different words. And there's nothing learned there. But when someone called in and said, I hate marijuana because it's going to put my teenager at risk, or, they have an opinion that's kind of, I think, wrong, but it gives you the opportunity to listen to their viewpoint, construct a response to that viewpoint, allay their concerns, accept what upsets them or accept what motivates them, and try to address it. And so when we're seeing in universities all this movement towards, being afraid of trigger warnings and this and that, I'll just straight up admit that I've been a victim of sexual assault, and I'm not gonna let that define me. That's history. That's behind me. And if I were to be going around all the time saying I'm a victim and every man out there wants to get at me and, trying to act as a victim all the time, that actually takes away my power. It says that I am defined by what happened to me. I am so weak and so little that this will define me, and that's wrong. And to actually force people to carry that victimhood with them forever, to say that every classroom has to be wary that that one person in the back who suffered abuse might be upset. I mean, for crying out loud, there's a lot of issues to talk about that are going to upset people, and if we're going to stop those conversations from having place, from taking place, it's going to seriously negatively impact people. I'm sure that's clear, but especially places like universities and institutions of learning, you need to be challenged, you need to be uncomfortable, you need to have debates, and this serious overreaction towards trigger warnings and all that sort of thing. I mean, the world out there is a place full of offensive, shocking things, and I guarantee you that wartime vets are not campaigning for newscasts to stop showing fireworks or whatever. You can find a trigger for anything that upsets you. When I see a prohibitionist, it upsets me, it triggers this disgust in me. But I'm not going to say they shouldn't be allowed to have their view shared. In fact, I would like them to share their view to give me the opportunity to tear it apart. So it really makes me concerned that this hyperreaction is going to put a lot of fear into people. It's almost like the media being intimidated about reporting or researching stuff because they don't want to get a negative response. That's the end of freedom of thought and freedom of information. Once you start self-censoring what kind of conversations you're going to have or what you're going to say lest you offend somebody, that's a very scary place.
Can I qualify that as part of the group that wrote that question? Can you just expand on that? Because I think that we all sort of agree a little bit on what the effect of these trigger warnings has on freedom of speech. I think, if I can assume this, for the most part, people here understand that. But let's say just coming from the perspective of being generous to the idea of where these people are coming from, and that they're thinking that I'm sure I can predict what Karen's going to say. But acknowledging that there are certain people who have issues that they're dealing with, what would you think of it would be a nice alternative to this madness?
A nice alternative is to actually get those people the treatment that they need. And the treatment that they need is not avoidance. That is the way to instill learned helplessness. There was an excellent article written just a few months ago it was co-written by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Luganoff of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education. And they called it The Coddling of the American Mind. And they went in depth, they really looked into this rabbit hole, and they found out that this phenomenon that's really manifesting en masse now on college campuses is largely a product of the self-esteem movement. It is a product of, or like I like to call it, the special snowflake movement. It is the product of children who have had helicopter parents. They've had nothing but structured time. They've had no unsupervised free time to get pushed around on the playground by other kids and have to learn how to deal with conflict on their own. They have been protected all their lives. They are generally the most protected, safest generation of young people that has ever lived on this planet. They are the least likely to suffer any kind of serious form of violence. They are the least likely to experience racism, to experience actual misogyny, to experience all kinds of horrible social ills that we are still working on, but we're much better than we were 100 or 200 years ago. So these are really privileged kids. They're absolutely 100% privileged kids. And they've never learned how to deal with things that upset them. And here's the thing, right? We have a thing in our brain called an amygdala, right? And that is, it's been kind of vilified as the the seat of fear, right? It's the fear center of the brain that we should be liberated from its power over us, right? But it's also crucial for learning because that's what gives you the uncomfortable feeling that leads you to change your behavior, right? So it's when you're walking down a dark alley and you get that uncomfortable feeling and you turn around and go to the well-lit street, that's your amygdala telling you, this is not such a good idea. It helps you stay alive, right? And if it doesn't get any exercise, then it atrophies. And the less unpleasantness you have to put up with day to day, the less it takes to trigger one of these sort of panicky responses where you're like, oh my God, cultural appropriation in Halloween costumes. Oh, that's so horrible. I'm so offended for the indigenous peoples. I'm white, but I'm offended for them. Right? That's how that works. The less it takes for them to just have a complete psychotic break and freak out. Avoidance isn't helping. What they actually, trigger warnings are not helping, they're counterproductive. And this is why, in order to be courteous, in order to be kind, in order to be compassionate to the people who have this problem where they're getting actually triggered, and it's not just some sense of moral superiority and wanting to like lord it over others and control what people do, like it often is among certain social justice-y, progressive-y types. The white person who's offended on behalf of that brown person over there who doesn't care. That kind of thing. Yeah, no, avoidance is the wrong thing. Exposure. Exposure is the right thing. That veteran who has PTSD, you know, maybe by the 10th, 4th of July, he's dealing with the fireworks better than he was the first 4th of July after he came home. So that's really how it works. It's exposure, it's time, and it's actually being interested in healing rather than being interested in slapping a Band-Aid on it so that it can separate.
Would you even say that trigger warnings might actually be triggers themselves in that, you know, just saying, hey, by the way, for those of you who here is going to be offended by this, be alert, be offended, you're on the ready now. It seems to me almost like they're kind of, it's like trying to prevent the trauma by bringing it up in a way. Is that fair?
I don't know, they've sort of almost taken almost a salacious kind of turn, like when I was writing 30 books, we had to put sort of a content warning as to, you know, what kind of stuff is going to be contained in this novel, and you always tried to make it as racy and edgy and witty as possible, right? And really play it up, you know, just how dirty this book is going to be, right? And so it's almost like these trigger warnings are like, this is about rape, you really want to read this. And this is about, like, you know, abuse, and you really, like, it's just going to be so salacious and so titillating. And yeah, it's just bizarre. It's like taking on this whole bizarre psychological thing. It's very strange. You have something?
Yeah, not too much. Actually, I really like what I've heard so far. I have actually a lot of trouble even believing that people who say they're triggered are actually expressing anything meaningful. I don't know, that's just me as a non-feeling jackass, I guess. But, I mean, whatever. But just to do kind of a quasi-legal analysis of it, how I look at something like that as a lawyer, like if someone was coming to me and saying, well, I feel triggered in school, I want to get them to stop because it's not really fair to me, because I have this and blah, 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 my idiosyncratic, you know, my own experiences make me this way. I would think, well, my response would be, well, what are you asking for? What's the remedy here? You want to get everyone else to stop talking about something just so you don't have to hear it? Well, that seems to me to imply that you have some sort of a right to be there to prevent them from, you know, doing something that's perfectly legitimate, perfectly legal, and probably worth having that conversation. And you can always leave. No one's keeping your butt glued in that seat. Well, I paid tuition, blah, blah, blah. Well, contract law is something else entirely, but if you want to restrict everyone else's right to expression based upon your own experiences, you have a world of hurt coming ahead of you. Let's say you go through a nasty divorce. Man, you don't know what's coming down the pipeline for you. it's probably best that you learn to deal with these things and stop trying to force yourself on other people, because that's what all this is about. Triggering and all this, I have such an aversion for it because it's authoritarianism. It's someone else telling you what to say and think. And you know what? I don't care. I'm going to do what I'm allowed to do, and I'm going to be with people that I, express the thoughts I want to express. And if you don't like it, well, we don't have to like each other. Let's just not be together. It's just that simple. Like, I won't force myself on you. You don't force yourself on me. Like, well, I don't understand why that's so hard, and it's just part of the problem, I think, is because it's, university, you're in close contact with people regularly. It's your first time away from home. Like, I'm almost romanticizing here. You've never had to deal with significant conflict that your parents can't step in and solve. And all of a sudden, all these little princesses and princes, they have to deal with like a little portion of the real world, and they realize that they can't handle it. And is taking that portion of the real world away from them the answer? I don't think so.
All right, well, that brings us to the end. I couldn't have asked for a better panel. Let's give them a hand.